support tier list for SMITE. What's up, YouTube? Been a little bit. We got another tier list for you guys. You guys have been asking for a lot of it in stream, in Discord, and you guys have been wanting to get an updated view on my opinion on the support tier list right now. We'll just be ranking the gods. We won't be doing all these gods because some of these gods aren't going to be actual supports. We're just going to do actual viable gods. Achilles is pretty mediocre tier, mediocre to lower tier, and I'm going to put Amma in this tier also. They both just don't do enough. They're like fine gods if you want to just play something unique, play something that's a little bit of fun. I think they're both fine gods. I just don't think they do enough to be an actual good support. Ares has actually seen a little bit more play recently. He's been picked as a counter to a lot of good supports right now. He has a good matchup into Athena, and I think he's actually really good for this meta where he doesn't need anything beyond tank boots just to be super tanky. I'm gonna actually put Ares in A tier because he is one of the top tier gods, I think, right now. Ardeo is, I think she has the same thing as Ares, where she's like A or B tier. I'm gonna put her in B tier just because she's not played as much as Ares. She has a lot of counters to her, but I think she's a fine god. I don't think she's bad. Athena is an A tier support. She is definitely good, but I think she is getting a little overrated right now. I think she's really strong and ranked, but I do think she's not broken or anything. Like, she's not something you have to ban. It's just the global. People don't play against globals for 5 months, and then a global's played and they're like, what the is happening? Willix, not happening. Bacchus, I think Bacchus is pretty bad. I think he's one of the worst support guardians in the game. He just feels like he's missing a part of his kit. It just doesn't feel good having points into year one, so you don't put up a single point into year one, and then you're just spamming it to try to keep your passive meter up the entire time. He does good damage. He's decently safe. I just don't think he's very good. And I think Kabrakan is the same as Ardeo. He's an okay god. He's got some good matchups, some bad matchups. You mostly pick him in like later parts of the draft just to get him that counter. He has probably one of the better 2v2 laning phases because he's so tanky, and he's got a lot of CC, a lot of lockdown, a lot of damage. It's when you get out of that 2v2 and you get into the 3v3 and then late game team fights that he starts to feel like he falls off a bit. I think Serb is same tier as these guys. Some games he feels very, very strong. Some games he just does not feel strong at all. And I think it just depends on if he can get ahead. If he can get ahead and use his level advantage and his passive well and just become unkillable and does a lot of damage, I think he's sick. But if he falls behind, it just feels like you're dying every 10 seconds and there's not much you can do about it. So I think Serb is an okay god. I think he does really well with tank boots. He's one of the better tank boots god in the games because he has just such good base damage that the tankiness makes him pretty unkillable. I'm not gonna rate Cthulhu even though he's a guardian. I think he's pretty terrible. Next up is Erlang. He's kind of in the same tier as the Amma Amma Achilles. Just okay, not great. Can snowball some laning phases, can get absolutely destroyed some laning phases. He's got good CC, decent damage, but he's not really that safe, and he does have a lot of bad matchups. Fafnir's a pretty okay god. I think he'll feel a lot better when he gets that cooldown reduction, because right now you use your 2 abilities and then you just feel like you're standing there for 15 seconds doing nothing. But I do think he's an okay god. He has really good farming. He's safe. His laning phase is a little weak, but I think he's all right. You're kind of just playing him for the late game. Fenrir's good right now. A lot of pressure he puts out. Brutalize does a ton of damage. He's got decent CC. He's got good beads pull, and he's very safe. And he uses tank boots very, very well. And I think that's going to be a big thing with assassins is their base damage is super high and their CC is high, and that's what Fenrir brings. Ganesha is whatever. I don't think Ganesha is very good, but I think this is a good tier to put him in. He's not up in B tier with these gods. I don't think Ganesha is terrible because I would actually rather play Ganesha than Bacchus, I think, right now. I think Bacchus is pretty terrible. So I think Ganesha is a pretty okay god. He just feels like a late game god that doesn't have a very good late game, and his laning phase is pretty poor. And it's the same thing kind of Geb has, but Geb actually has a good late game. Even if his early game is a little bit worse than Ganesh, he's still got that good late game that you kind of play Geb for. Guan, we'll just play him in solo. Herc's kind of the same tier as Fenrir, maybe a little bit worse at it than Fenrir is right now. Herc's kind of gotten a lot of nerfs thrown at his way because support Herc was so strong for so long. I still think he's okay, but he is not as good as he used to be in like season 7. He's fine. You just want to play him, get ahead. If you can get ahead, you do a lot. If you fall behind, you don't really do anything. I think Horus is fine too. Actually, I'm gonna put Herc down here. I'm gonna move Herc down. I think Horus and Herc are basically the same thing, except Horus is just like a slightly better late game, and then Herc relies on displacement, while Horus just relies on CC and lockdown. I think the heal is kind of the thing that makes Horus actually a really good god, and I think he is a bit underplayed, but I can't really put him any higher because he is not played very much. I think Khepri's just like the slightly better version of Geb and Ganesh. They're just backline gods, but Khepri's got a good early game, good mid game, good late game. He's just like good the entire time through, while these two are just bad early, and then Ganesh is good mid, good late, and Geb is good mid, great late. So I think Khepri is just a slightly better version of these two gods. And his ult is still good, his 2 is still good. Kumba, I think Kumba is probably the worst possible support you could play. I think Kuzenbo is actually a little underrated right now. His base damage is super high. He's very hard to pick. He's got very strong displacement. His 2v2 is strong. He's got a good early game, good mid game, great late game. His kit is designed to go late game, but for some reason, I think it's mostly just he has pretty poor matchups into the top gods. I think if Ares wasn't as strong, Sobek wasn't as strong, Ymir wasn't, Yemoja wasn't, I think you'd see a lot more Kuzenbo, but because of how bad he is into those top gods, I think that's what keeps him pretty low. I'm gonna put Mulan just down here. She's just the same thing as these two and Erlang. Actually, she's more like Hercules, but I think she's just worse at it than Herc. Her late game is just terrible. Absolutely terrible. Naja, same thing kind of. Since they nerfed him, he just doesn't feel as good to play in support. I think Odin's actually pretty good. He is a little bit more team dependent and comp dependent and enemy team dependent than most of the other gods. Like a lot of gods in this tier, as you'll see, is they have very hard counters in like the higher tiers. Odin has very bad matchups into Ares. He has actually a decent matchup into these two, but he's got a bad matchup into Sobek, a bad matchup into Yemoja, a weird matchup into Yemoja, but I would say Yemoja is just good into him overall. But yeah, I don't think he's terrible. He just has pretty bad matchups into the top tiers. And Serqet is, I love Serqet. I'm gonna throw her into B tier. I think she's good. I think she's very good. I know a lot of people might not agree with this, but I think she is top 15-ish support, and I would rather play her than most of these gods. She does have some very bad matchups, namely into Khepri, but for the most part, I think she's always gonna be super safe. She does a lot of base damage. She pulls actives very easily, and she can burst down Squishy's late game by herself. The Croc, probably a top 2 support right now. He just does so much. He's so hard to kill, so much displacement. His pluck is broken. His passive is broken. Playing into a Sobek as almost any god, you feel like you can't even walk up out of your tower line because you feel like you're just going to get plucked in half health. And you also can't trade into him because he has heal. You don't. He's got base tankiness from his passive, so you're going to be, if you do try to out-trade him, you're going to do not as much as him. And then if you do get him low and you are like locking him down, he's just going to ult, get extra protections, become immune to CC, and probably just get out. Sylvanas, kind of the same spot Bacchus is in. He just doesn't feel great to be played right now. You don't really feel all that tanky, and that's what you want is Sylvanas. You just want to be super, super tanky, and you want to be able to just like play around your team and make them super tanky. And he can make his team super tanky, but it still doesn't feel that great. He's got a good 2v2, but he does still get out 2v2'd by some gods. And I think that's kind of his biggest thing. I'm going to put Terra into A tier. I think Terra would probably be a top 3 god in the support role if Ankh wasn't a thing. If Cursed Ankh wasn't a thing, I think Terra would be super broken. Her kit's just strong all around. She's got a good early, good mid, good late game. The only problem is in the late game, if you ult your team and they have an Ankh, you're just insta-popping that Ankh and there's nothing you can just stop it on your team. Next up is Xing. I think Xing is just pretty mediocre. I think he's just better than all of these gods. You kind of just play him for that being unkillable early, get to the late game, continue being unkillable, and then have good CC, good lockdown. And I think in this meta where crit is super strong, his 1 is like the one thing you can actually do to counter it. Because his 1, while it counters crit, it doesn't counter chins. So he does not very good into chins gods, but he does well into crit gods. And right now, there's only crit gods. So I think Xing is in a pretty decent spot right now. Yemoja, the holy grail of supports. She's still insane. I don't think anything has changed. You can watch any support tier list, any tier list, and if Yemoja is brought up, she's going to be towards the top, and nothing has changed with that. She has too much lockdown, too much TC. Her kit has too much going for it. She's too safe. She has literally everything you could want except CC immunity. Ymir is probably the 3rd best of these characters because I think he has a bad matchup into Sobek and a 50-50 matchup into Yemoja. So I don't think Ymir is as good as these two, but I do think he's still like the next best support besides these two. You just cannot fight a 2v2 into this god. You cannot win a 2v2 against him. You cannot out-trade him if he hits his abilities, and it feels super impactful to have a Ymir walking through the jungle, and if you play too far up, he just walls it, and if he misses the wall, he insta-drops it and can just place it again 2 seconds later or anywhere else. So I think Ymir is very, very strong, and the only reason he's not the best support in the game is just because he doesn't have great matchups into these two. And he has a couple bad matchups down to here also, but they're really not that good necessarily, so I don't think there's anything to really worry about. And I think these 3 gods are going to be great gods for you to learn for support. Their kits have kind of stayed the same, and even if they do get nerfed numbers-wise, the abilities are just super strong. Sobek Pluck, Ymir Wall, Yemoja 1, like all their abilities are just strong abilities, and they're going to be strong in support as long as the meta for support stays at least kind of the same. That is the support tier list. I don't think I want to change anything. I think I'm comfortable with kind of where everything is. Everything's a little bottom loaded right now because I just put a lot of warriors that I don't really think are that good down here. For the most part, this is what I think is going to be the tier list. I think this is what you should be looking for. It's why you've been seeing so many of these gods banned. banned. So because they're just like the absolute top tiers, and that's why you're going to be seeing them banned in SPL. And I think they should be the ones you'd be playing in ranked also. So thank you guys for watching the video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Maybe leave a like, comment, subscribe if you're not.